All right. Thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Constance, for the email, and Mina for setting this up, and everybody that I met before. Um, my name is Jon Sorrentino. I'm a graphic designer. I have been doing it for a bit. I graduated in 2015 with about $60,000 in loans. That's been 9 years adulting now, and since then I've worked for 7 different companies. Two of those 9 years have been for fully freelancing, but over that course of that entire time, I've sort of freelanced in between. And since then, I've traveled to about 15 countries. As Constance mentioned, I'm currently in Bali. That's where I sort of live right now. And yeah. So I'm going to talk to you guys about why you should or shouldn't freelance as a graphic designer. Um, but first, we're going to talk about me. A little background about myself. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and Sheepshead Bay for till about the ripe age of 7. Then I moved to the Jersey Shore. I don't know if this like is if people know this anymore, but this is a very popular show about the area I grew up in, and more accurately, this is what the Jersey Shore looks like. Um, when I was growing up, I was a typical art student. All through elementary to high school, I made really weird paintings. I called myself a painter as a kid. I took really weird photos on film of my pets for some reason, and I got weird tattoos growing up as well. And then I graduated high school and had no clue what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to continue with being an artist, an art student, whatever you want to call it. And so I went to community college. I made more weird stuff, very weird stuff. I don't know why I thought this was a good idea to make 3 versions of this, but I did anyway. And then after about 2 years of community, before I graduated, I took one course really that was called 2D visual layout. And this was a course that helped me a bit figure out what I wanted to do with graphic design, or at least interested in graphic design. 1 second. I'm gonna make sure this thing keeps resume. Yeah. My camera keeps going out, so I need to shift it back and forth a bit sometimes. But yeah, back. Okay, cool. I graduated community college with a liberal arts degree. Yeah. And I had a portfolio of work. A lot of it was still a bunch of shitty paintings. I had some design stuff there. Really, it was just like me messing around with color and imagery. And so I took all that, submitted it to Rutgers University, which was a state college in New Jersey at the time. And then I applied to the design program there, and I got in. And this is one of the first days of me as in my design classes. Um, and while I was there, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about typography, color, contrast, composition, all the principles that you guys might have learned about during your program. And yeah, I spent 3 years there, graduated, and I had about 2 weeks in between from graduating to my first job, and I got really lucky. I think like I happened to throw together a portfolio at the time, um, reached out to a recruitment agency, and I got hired at my first job at Yahoo. And joined the marketing and brand team there. I knew I wanted to kind of coming out of the design program. I knew I wanted to do branding and marketing and work on big brands and make cool logos that would get seen by a ton of people. And this was a really great opportunity for me. It wasn't full time. I actually joined as a contractor. And the major project that I worked on was this fantasy football partnership or fantasy football initiative that Yahoo was really big for at the time. Um, they were just finishing off building a bunch of different experiences within the stadium. And so I got to touch a lot of the physical and spatial sort of projects outside of the stadium as well as inside. Um, and the things that I wanted to kind of, make sure I show with you guys in these presentations is like trying to be as transparent as possible. So as I mentioned, like, Yahoo. I got the job as through a recruitment agency. I was a contractor. This was the first time I learned about not having a full-time job as a creative and being a freelancer. It was pretty abrupt. I was there for 6 months, and I'm pretty sure I got paid about $25 an hour. After that, I went on to work at a nightclub. This was Pasha in New York, which is a big nightclub at the time. It was open for about 10 years. And I joined as the graphic designer there. I interned with them a bunch while I was in university, and I made a bunch of really weird flyers and posters that would promote events. Um, and I also happened to have the opportunity to take photos there. So I did a lot of photography there while working with them. It's a very odd job. I don't like I love it, and I'm still connected with a lot of the people that I worked with then. But it was just a very funny kind of situation that I look back on. And so um, the reason why I got that job, as I mentioned, I was an intern previously. I was full time there for 1 year, and I think I got $45,000 per year, maybe 50. I don't remember though. Then after that, I went to a really insignificant ad tech company, ad tech product company. It's called SpongeCell, and basically there I ended up just making digital ads that you would see on your web pages while visiting websites for different brands. Um, and while the work wasn't sexy, it taught me a lot about working with the team and trying to and really finding the gold, I mean, the little gold nuggets within these opportunities. It was a little bit more formal than my previous jobs, and at the end of the day, yeah, these were digital ads, but I was still learning how to talk to these companies. Cool Gear happened to be a client at the time, which was like a big, massive drink refreshment container company. Got to work with Dr. Pepper, got to work with brands like Jeep. And so, like, while, again, we weren't making anything sexy, these were just ads that were going to go on websites and people might click through them. It was still important to understand the bigger picture at times. Um, got this job through a college friend that it was full time. I was there for about 1 year, and I went up to $52,000 while I was there. After that, I worked at a company called Viceland. So Viceland was a TV channel that Vice had launched at the height of its popularity. I got I was really, really excited coming from, as I mentioned, not so sexy work, making digital ads. Viceland was this like new, exciting TV channel that was going to be making super weird content. And I was joining the team there as the off-air marketer for all out-of-home and advertising campaigns. And that was a really fun job for me. I got to work on a ton of different shows with a ton of different artists and personalities and musicians, chefs. And the other thing that I remember the most about this job was being able to create things that my friends saw and messaged me about, and to say like, oh my God, did you make this? And we did a lot of weird stuff at the time. The legalization of marijuana was just coming around, and so we had a show all about that. We did campaigns similar to this, where we would take a job role and say, add smokes weed as well. Um, we did really cool social initiatives like the Women's March. At the time, I think this was right before the election. Um, and so, yeah, I was at that company for about a year. Again, I joined, this should say contractor, but I was there full time, basically Monday through Friday, 9 to 7 o'clock. Um, and I don't remember how much I got paid, because it wasn't like a full-time salary. It was a contracted position. I basically got my check, went home, and took a 2-hour bus back to New Jersey, because that's where I lived at the time when I was taking this job. But then, oh, and I think it's also important that at the end of my 1 year, they decided to not renew my contract. They played it off as I was like a great hire and everything. I don't think they really liked me. But because I was already within the company of Vice, it gave me the opportunity to make connections within that company at the time. And when they had given me about a month and a half notice so that they weren't going to be working with me anymore, I went around and asked different departments if they had any opportunities available. So then I ended up working within the company for Vice proper, and I worked as a product designer. And so I went from traditional, or I say traditional, but like quote unquote graphic design and advertising and print to digital and websites and apps and things like that. And this was like my first real job as what they called a product designer at the time. And so I got to work on, Vice being a media company, they had this like massive portfolio of websites. And so we got to work on a ton of different problems regarding all of the media properties there. I also got to work on things like the Vice News app, um, which was really cool as well. So I got to, touch a bunch of different projects during my time there. And so getting this job through networking within the company was really important. I ended up joining an amazing team that I like loved working with. I was there full time, 2.5 years, and I think by the end of that, I got up to about $72,000 a year salary. And then I left Vice and I went to PepsiCo. Pepsi, whatever you want to call it. PepsiCo is like the proper name that everyone that works there calls it. But I worked for one of the biggest snack and beverage companies in the world, Big Blue. And I don't really have much of the work that I worked on there because some of it just never saw the light of day. I ended up joining the first year, I ended up joining what I call a blue sky team. So we weren't really tied to a brand, that you would know of like Cheetos or Doritos or Pepsi or Mountain Dew. I was part of a team that worked within other teams. So we would help on some of those projects, but then we would also get projects like this where we started from ground zero, developed a completely new drink, tried to do the branding for it, or did the branding for it, and then tried to get it on its feet and selling it in stores and stuff like that. And so this was a project that I did called Earthshine. It was a more natural sort of idea of like a rooted beverage. And we came up with, a bunch of different ideas for how this should look, and this is what we landed on. I spent a year on that team. I had gotten poached at while I was at Vice. I got reached out to on LinkedIn. I spent a year there, and when I joined at $105,000 in terms of salary. But after a year there, I was really frustrated with the work. I was really frustrated with how we were working and what projects we were working on, and so I ended up again similar to Vice, where I started to talk to a bunch of different departments within the company, and I got a job on the e-commerce team. So I went from product designer at Vice to more branding and marketing at Pepsi, and then went back into product UI UX within Pepsi again in a different team. And so there, my big focus, my big responsibility was working on e-commerce projects, e-commerce initiatives, building tools, internal tools for the company. And this slide, um, this is called Pantry Shop. This is one of the big projects that I walked away with. Um, this was just about the time, this was during COVID. And right before that, we had been working on getting one of the first e-commerce marketplaces up for Pepsi. And so when COVID hit, we were like, okay, let's launch this in the next month. And so basically, it was just Pepsi's version of Amazon. Pepsi has a huge portfolio of snacks, beverages. For example, own Aunt Jemima. They have Life cereal, Chewy bars. There are brands within the PepsiCo portfolio you may not know. And so we wanted to create a marketplace or an e-commerce shop where during COVID, people could order snacks and beverages to their homes. I got that job again, networking within the company. I interviewed for it. After about 2 years working there, I was up to about 110. I think it was 110 or $115,000 in terms of salary. Then I left PepsiCo. I said goodbye, and I worked for Barstool Sports. This was a fun position. I don't have any work to really show for it because I was only there for 6 months. Um, So during COVID, I started traveling a lot. Hence why now I'm in a completely different country. At that time, I was traveling through South America, and I was working out of Colombia. And I left PepsiCo at the beginning of, or right before 2022, and I joined Barstool around then. And then I was really only with Barstool for 6 months. At that point, it had been about 7 to 8 years of working full time. Um, I had been traveling a lot. The work at Barstool was really interesting, and again, similar to Pepsi and Vice, where I was working on things that were going to be seen and used and touched by a lot of people, and that's always really fulfilling for me. Being able to get feedback and see how people react to the stuff that I put out there has always been really engaging for me. But at the same time, I like just knew at that point I was so tired of working for other companies, other people for projects that didn't really have any tie to. And so after 6 months, I ended up just kind of saying, putting my 2 weeks in, saying, listen, it's just not for me anymore. I'm going to go freelance. And so I did. And so I left there. After that 6 months, it was a full-time job. It was $160,000 a year. It's the most I ever got paid. It's the most I ever probably will get paid in a full-time job for a while now, because I don't plan on going back anytime soon. So that brings me to the beginning of 2022, where I started to freelance. I started to reach out to clients. But before I get into that stuff, because there's only a few slides left here. The entire time I had a full-time job, I worked a lot after those hours, after work office hours. And so I'd go home and I'd have either friends or contacts or acquaintances from other people get in touch with me about projects to work on them. And so I'd do a logo here and there, do a website, but I'd also do a lot of self-initiated projects. I didn't add a slide in here for it, but one of the big projects I started during my time at Vice was a podcast called Well Fed. It was a podcast where I just basically took my audio gear, went around New York because there's tons of really amazing and talented designers and creatives, and I would just pop up into their apartment and set up mics and talk to them for about an hour about kind of similar to what we're doing here, and just talk about their journey and how they became, a designer or painter or whatever it may have been. And that was really like super, super helpful for me. It helped me really figure out where I wanted to go with design, what I wanted to do with it, how I wanted to, the type of work I wanted to do, things like that. And these self-initiated projects over the years were really, really helpful as well in continuing this sort of momentum of going from, company after company to then going to full independent freelance. And so 2022, a quick couple of stats. I had 9 clients in that first year, and I made $96,000. That is not takeaway, by the way. I should have included the after tax slide here, but after the tax is about a $70,000, whatever. And like what have you, if that's a lot, if that's not a lot. I think it's good to be sharing numbers like this to give you guys a sense of what's potentially available, and like what you guys can um you know achieve or even blow past, because quite frankly, I in the last 2 years I've been taking a lot of time to sort of balance out my life and not work so much, and try to figure out different ways of supporting the life that I want to do and things like that. So um 9 clients, and those clients were all over in terms of different projects and different sectors. A lot of them were through Slack channels. I think my first 2 clients were through Slack channels that I had been in. One was a gentleman who had a company actually in South America at the time. Um, and that was just funny enough, just like formatting PowerPoints and keeping them on brand to align with the company. That got me through the first couple of months. The second job was a product that I had used in the past. A lot of friends had passed me work, and two of the major clients towards the end of 2022 came from podcasts. And I think a lot of people, this goes under the radar, but I listen to a lot of podcasts about business, about science, and a bunch of different industries. And whenever I find someone interesting, I send them a message and say, "Hey, listen, I'm a designer. If you ever have any opportunities, just let me know. I find your work really interesting." And I've got a lot of work like that. 2023 rolled around, and actually, hold on, let me go back to 2022. So during 2022, I was in Colombia, and I had moved to Spain. And then that brings us to 2023. In November, I went back to the US. I'm actually not too far from you guys, or at least I don't think I'm far from you from the last time, from what I remember from what you had told me, Constance. So my home base now, when I am back in the States, is at my parents' place in South Carolina. And so I went back in November, spent New Year's there, did some work. And then 2023 kicked off, and I started to travel back again in April, picked up work before then. And now that 2023 is over, I have had 11 clients, or had 11 clients. I made $68,000. And it's funny, like looking back from 2022, 2023, obviously there's a big gap. And I could tell you exactly why, besides as I mentioned, trying to find balance, a little bit more balance in my life, trying to figure out different ways of supporting the lifestyle that I want, being able to travel and stuff like that. That kind of resulted in me just doing less work. I say less work, but I have more clients, which is funny, but less less work in the sense of client stuff, or full-on client projects, because a lot of the clients that came from this year came also to do things like social media and brand partnerships. So it's not as for me, not as exciting. And so, yeah, a lot of those clients were previous clients from the last couple of years, and also friends. And I'm sort of hitting this moment now where a lot of my friends and colleagues, previous coworkers, they're sort of at new companies, or they're starting their own companies, and they are, coming to me with questions about it. And sometimes we get to work together, and sometimes we don't. So what am I doing now? Hold on one second. My camera just shot out again. FaceTime. Switch. Okay, back again. So I'm still figuring it out. There's nothing here. There's nothing about this presentation that's supposed to give you an idea that I haven't figured everything out. It is a constant journey. I'm at 9 years now, almost going on 10 years of being a professional graphic designer, adulting, and all that stuff. And I feel super energized. I feel super excited about where I'm at, and what I'm doing. I think if anything, those things are just a little bit more. I feel a little bit more sure about them. And so this is me a couple of months ago when I cut my hair. Big old smile on my face. I wake up every day super excited. Um, and I live in Bali. I get to see beautiful scenery, lots of sunsets, and yeah, so if you're thinking about freelancing, I know that the title, or there was one slide in here that was, why you shouldn't freelance as a graphic designer. And I really just put that in there because it's not for everyone. It doesn't have to be for everyone. I didn't do it for 7 years out of the 9 years after I graduated. I did, but I didn't. And after a while of learning a lot from those different positions, full-time roles and things like that, I finally felt like I had enough knowledge and experience to go and do that, to go and operate independently and figure out how to get clients and work through projects on my own. Because at the moment, it's really just me. So some things that I think are really important to know. With great freedom comes great responsibility. Again, I'm living in another part of the world right now where things are a little bit more easygoing. The cost of living is definitely not as nearly expensive as the States. And so there are days where I don't work. And while that is wonderful and it sounds amazing, it's also important to know that if I don't work, you don't bring in money for food and bills and things like that. So it becomes very much a responsibility to balance, to find good time management, to balance your workload, to not take on too much work, to make sure that you are getting enough sleep and things like that, you know? It's really easy to just let things go and fall to the side and forget about them after a weekend out with friends. But, you know, to continue this, to have longevity and to continue doing it for a while, to create that life that you're looking for, you have to be pretty responsible. So it's not just all fun and games. Two, what you put in is what you'll get out. This is something that I learned playing sports as a kid. You know, everyone says practice, 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 and graphic design is no different. Being a freelancer, you know, for me, I wouldn't say a business owner, but I'm hopefully aspiring business owner one day. The more practice you do, the more effort or energy you put into it. Uh, Personally, I believe that you'll get that back uh, tenfold. And so graphic design is really my life, and I say that in a positive way. You know, I'm really passionate about design. I grew up as a really artsy, creative kid, and I really enjoy how design has made me enjoy life that much more. I love making things. I love solving problems. I love working with people. Um, and design is all of those things for me. And so I've put in a lot of effort and a lot of time to make sure that what I'm doing is fun for me. And I've learned a lot from that. Never stop asking questions. Never stop asking questions. This goes two ways. When working with clients, what they tell you is, you know, what I would say is never take what they tell you as Bible. Um, Always ask questions as to why they feel that way or why they feel that way. Get used to it. Get comfortable with it. And you know what? It'll also help you in life in general, talking about feelings and stuff like that, or solving problems. In addition to the to just when you know this idea of never stop asking questions with clients, it's also, you know, about being curious. A lot of the recent clients that I've gotten this year have been in Bali actually, and I can almost tell you attribute each of those clients to a conversation that I've had with them where I'm asking them about what they do. I'm very curious. I'm a very curious person, and so you know I'll sit down in a cafe or somewhere, someone will sit down next to me or you know ask me a question, I'll ask them a question, and we'll just have a conversation because I'm genuinely interested in people. I'm genuinely interested about learning about all these different things that people might be doing. And so never stop asking questions, always be curious. um and yeah, that's it. Thank you guys for listening to that. And I will stop sharing my screen. And I want to leave this for questions. I think, like, you know, obviously I can tell you guys everything, or not everything, but all I know about freelancing and all that stuff, and try to put a bunch of slides together. But I don't think there's really a great way to illustrate that. And I'd probably do a better job just asking your specific questions, and that would be more helpful. So, um, yeah, thanks. Does anyone have questions? I have a question. You're all well, John, can you hear me? It's a little low. You're a little distant, so maybe go up to the laptop to ask the question.
What did you take away from your corporate life and how did you apply it to your freelance? So like what strategies did you learn in your corporate life and how do you apply them to your personal practice, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so much. Like, I think a couple of things. One, just I had gone, you know, when I look back at like my corporate full-time jobs and stuff, it was truly a progression of size of company, span, reach, size of the teams that I was working on, things like that. And the over time I learned that graphic design and being a freelancer is not about just being super talented or super creative. It's not about that at all. It's actually about having a sense of business and being able to really understand problems and how to work with people. And that is something that I've really taken away from my full-time roles. Also, just like being able to think differently from all the different types of jobs I've had. You know, the job at Viceland when I first got the job at Viceland, I actually spent probably the first 3 or 4 months. Well, not, I don't want to say the first 3 or 4 months, but like that whole entire year that I was there for the first time, a lot of my job consisted of like formatting and putting decks together and presentations and pitch decks for campaigns and stuff like that. So, and I look back at that and that skill that I learned, the very high attention to detail that my creative director expected from me, the speed and like those are all things that I still have today, that I learned from full-time jobs. Another thing I think is really just having, I guess it kind of melds with the first one, is like having a sense of business. Um, Getting work for me, I'm sure someone might have a question about this, but getting work for me doesn't happen just by putting a post out on social media or anything like that. Um, and I saw that in companies like Pepsi and companies like Vice and companies like Barstool. And, it takes work to get clients and then deliver the work. And so, you start to develop and learn about all these other skills outside of Photoshop, outside of Illustrator, outside of Figma, that you also need to learn to continue, doing this.
Thank you.
All right, is it echoey if I stand up around this area a little bit? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. It's still kind of low, but I can put my ear to the laptop.
So I'm standing like directly from the TV now. So you
Perfect.
mentioned with great, freedom comes great responsibility. What are some of these specific strategies that you use to make sure you manage your time well and get stuff done?
Yeah. So I've learned project management software. I have my own little way. I don't like to just like take something off the shelf if I can like figure out a way that really fits for me. And truth be told, I use Notion. Notion's just basically this like sandbox where you can build pretty much any sort of like table organization format. Um, but yeah, that became really important. I guess, you could say when I didn't have as many clients, it's really easy, excuse me, tracking emails and stuff like that, having to-do lists with pen and paper. But now I have a whole system. I can actually share it with you guys. Let me just pull up, more stuff on my screen. Where is it? So here. So this is my Notion. This has evolved over time. This is like a life view of everything that I have. So it's not just projects, or it's not just client projects, which I call campaigns. It's like projects of my own and things to do with those projects and all the different tickets. Again, this is all personally for me, separate from my client work. Um, life goals. I now organize this stuff, because if you don't organize it and you don't see it, I believe that you don't do it. This is what like my dashboard looks like for client projects. Um, these are all things that are going on now and things that are ongoing and blah, 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 blah. And I have different, views for each of them, for my finances, for client stuff, all of that. And so it's been really key to tracking the work and making sure that gets done. And I track things down to, um, let me see. I track things down to like the hour. I don't know if I can zoom in on that. Like how many hours I spent on stuff. Like I log my time because I want to make sure that I am working in a way and pricing things in a way that makes sense for me. Um, I know that sounds crazy, and not to say that's not necessarily to allude to the idea that I charge hourly, but for me, if I'm able to track that stuff, I'm able to know a lot more about how I prefer to work or how I'd like to work next time.
Does anyone in the chat have a question that they want to throw out there? Any questions? All right. Guess we'll wait on, how many people do we have here? Oh, I guess we have, nice. Go for it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Come on up.
I guess it kind of goes back to the like time management question a little bit, but I was just wondering if there were like, you have any tips on how to balance like a personal project on the side and like client work or business work, like together or into the balance that, if that makes sense.
Is there, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I got that correct. Is there any tips about balancing client work and sort of like work, like passion projects? So yes and no. Really quickly, like, can I don't know if I could see this. Let me see if I could see the gallery view. Okay. Can you guys, who's like a senior, who's like about to graduate? Raise your hand. Okay, cool. And do you guys have a sense like that you want to go freelance immediately? You can like shake your heads. I can see if it's yes or no. We don't know. Okay, okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I wish I could tell you, yeah, you know, take an hour before leaving like your office job or whatever, corporate job, and you know, do some stuff there. But like realistically, like there's 24 hours in a day. Hopefully you're getting at least 8 of those are sleeping, you know, you're sleeping, so you'll have like 16 hours in a day. Um, an office job is about 8 to 9 hours. So you have very little time. And so you have to make time. You have to make some sacrifices, I think. I would either wake up early in the morning and you know and that's also to consider like things like I'd wake up and go to the gym and I would commute sometimes 2 hours and this and that, and so you try to make it work as best as possible. You find time. This is kind of goes back to the thing of like what you put into it is what you're going to get back. And so if you're passionate about it, if you are really interested and you're excited, you will figure out the time. Maybe that's on weekends, or maybe that's after your office hours and stuff like that. Maybe instead of watching Netflix, or maybe Netflix is in the background, you open up that project that you started or want to start, and you tinker with it, and you do that until you get to a place where you're happy with it. You know, this podcast that I had launched when I was at Vice about 2018, that was after hours. And then on the weekends, I would go to record all throughout the city, and I'd come back and I would edit those and have those work with a friend to edit them. And I made it happen. And, you know, you just need to kind of know yourself realistically, be realistic about how much time you have, and see when you can start making progress on some of these things that you'd like to work on.
Getting real close, you should be able to hear me okay.
Yeah.
So you've been all over, it sounds like. This is less design based, but like, what are some of the cool stuff that you've done? I'm just kind of curious. From traveling.
I lived in Colombia for a year. I think that's pretty cool. Uh, I've so my traveling has sort of changed over the years, where I would move from one country to another after a couple months. And then that started to get a little tiring for me. And so I lived in Colombia for about a year, lived in Spain for 6 months. I've been in Bali now for 9 months. Um, Trying to think of some really cool stuff. I saw a concert at the top of this massive man-made rock in Colombia, which was really cool. I don't, yeah, and there's some stuff in there. Believe me, I've climbed like a 10,000 foot mountain. But you know, it's at some point maybe my brain's just not functioning to remember all of them. But, you know, like in regards to design, being able, again, like having that as such a big part of my life when I travel, it is fulfilling to see how design is in other parts of the world. And I gotta say, like, right, Southeast Asia, Asia in general is super, super creative and talented. Um, yeah, I surfed in Bali. I had a coconut in the Philippines. I can't think of anything specific. I'm sorry.
I got a question. John, what are you currently working on? I know you have some cool like newsletters and some pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So in terms of personal and client stuff, I have where's my Notion? I think I have like 4 client projects right now. One, two, three, four, five, six client projects. And then on the side, as Constance mentioned, I publish a newsletter, one every Monday, hopefully, as long as I'm not feeling too exhausted, where it's called, the one I publish every Monday is called Creative Juice. It's basically just the idea is to inspire you as a creative, looking at some cool stuff and start your Monday so that you can crush the rest of the week. And then I started publishing a second one that's monthly, which is called Portfolio Squeeze, which is basically some of the best design portfolio websites that I've seen around the web, where we kind of just tear down one that month, talk about what was done really well with it, and highlight a few other things as well in there. And so I have a lot of personal projects going on, and that's, as you saw, like why kind of resulted in making less in the last year, because you know, like the question before, how do you sort of balance that? If I take on more client projects and I have these ideas that I want to do, maybe I won't actually have time to see those through. If I have any sort of confidence or idea that I one day want to actually be doing those to support my life and my lifestyle. So, these are some of the things I have dreams of starting an agency this year at some point, or a studio. Working on that currently. And so I'm partnering with a friend out here to go and find some clients now, some other clients, and figuring that out. And, I love writing. So I write and I make TikToks and all that stuff. And you just have to, find the time somehow while also being healthy and safe and getting enough sleep. Don't forget that.
Hi, John. I'd like to ask a question too. So, yeah, I think it's super cool to see your work, and so I would like to hear more. Like, what's your reason, like, decide to quit the corporate job and become freelancer? I think you mentioned like work-life balance and maybe the freedom. Do you have some like examples or things that really kind of like make you make that final call? And do you really what is your experience like actually be a freelancer? Do you feel like you actually get a better balanced life, or you actually have to work harder to get the life you're looking for?
Yeah. When I graduated school, I remember this day very clearly. We had a thesis show, and I had 2 friends or 2 colleagues, friends at the time, where we both all looked at each other and we said, "Hey, maybe we should one day like start something of our own." We like working together. We both think that we all think that we're really talented. Let's do that. Because I know one day, like I'm gonna want to do that. You guys are gonna want to do it. Let's do that. Turns out those 2 friends got married, and they're designers at different companies. But that had always been an idea of mine, starting my own thing. Um, and so really like the my time, my experience doing a full-time job was sort of just a timer as to how long that would have taken and how long I would have felt confident to do so. Um, I think it's actually fairly easy to have more balance, working for a full-time job, for a corporate job, or for a company, um, because you're expected to start at one time and end at this time, and then you can just shut off and go home. You don't have to do anything else after that. You can just go watch Netflix or whatever. And so, like, yes, some of the jobs I had might have been frustrating in terms of people I worked with, the projects weren't so exciting, anything like that. But like, I don't look back and being like, I hated corporate America the whole time, It's just for me, like personally, like I knew that I was going to always be happier working on something that I started. And so going freelance at the beginning of 2022 was really just that. It was really just this moment where I felt confident enough, I felt experienced enough to step out on my own. And part of that is I had gained also, I gained, and I felt like I gained enough network where I could sort of rely on them to help me out if I needed to. When it comes to freelance, I would say that it is yes, it's a balance. Is it easier to find balance? I don't want to say yes or no. It depends, right? I think that first point I mentioned, the three things, like three takeaways, or the second point is like what you put in is what you get out. And so for me, like if I know that I want to have this really amazing design studio one day, like sure, after I spend a couple of hours during the day to work on client projects, I'll go have dinner and then I'll come back to the office because it's Tuesday night. I shouldn't be going out and gallivanting around town, and like that's a really important thing for me. So I'm gonna spend time on it. This newsletter, like that I do, sometimes I don't get to it on Fridays. Like, in a perfect world, I would have it done every Friday before 3 o'clock. But realistically, like I know that's not gonna happen. And so sometimes I come in on a Saturday morning or a Sunday and write it then. Or sometimes I do it even on my Monday night, because, I happen to be in a different time zone, and a lot of the people that subscribe and sign up and read it are in the States. So that works in my benefit. But it's not, I wouldn't say it's difficult to find balance. It's just really how knowing yourself and how you want to operate is what I think really makes the difference. If you want to just take on enough clients to pay your bills and do your thing, that's fine. You can absolutely do that. I think the other thing that's really nice is figuring out how you want to work with people and how you want to work with clients. And that is something that I really enjoy about freelance, because I get to decide how uh, how I want to work with clients, and the types of projects I want to work with them on, and how we interact with each other for meetings and stuff like that. And so I'm really at the helm of defining how those processes happen.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other things you guys want to talk about? Getting jobs, networking, anything?
How do you get a job?
This might be too forward. Wait, hold on. Philip in the chat said this might be too forward. It's not too forward, Philip. Since you are basically self-employed, are taxes an issue? No. So this is like one of the things, right? The pleasantries of being a freelancer. Um, you have to be, a business operator in a sense. Like you have to be mindful of this stuff. Figuring out how you invoice and track your invoices, and then at the end of the year, deliver that packet to whoever does your taxes. I can say that I do not do my taxes. I do not file them myself. I go to someone for help. I will absolutely always pay for a service like that because I will not have a mind for it. Um, and so part of making that easy is making sure that I have all my invoices tracked, all of my expenses, stuff like that. I keep those somewhat organized enough to hand them to my accountant, and he takes care of my taxes. Any other questions? Anyone in the Zoom as well? Feel free to just send them in the chat and I'll try to answer them one by one.
Anybody else? Yeah, 5 minutes. Wrap it up. All right.
Wrap it up there, 5 minutes, if anyone else has any questions, feel free. Otherwise, no, not here, we'll just kind of. Alrighty, well, this has been great. Thank you so much, John. We really appreciate you coming and speaking to us through Zoom, even though that meant you had to wake up probably extra early for us. Is there any other departing messages you'd like to give? Any, things you'd like to say, plugs?
No, not really. It was a normal time. This is a normal morning for me in the sense of time. So don't worry about that. Yeah, if you guys have any other questions at some point, you can always either, I think, DM me on Instagram, or you can just leave a comment on any sort of video I make on TikTok, and I'll try to get to it. But yeah, and if you want to like read more about anything that I mentioned in terms of freelancing or portfolio websites, my personal website, not my portfolio, is callthedesignguy.com.
Alrighty, well, thank you so much, John. We appreciate you so much from the GD+I Club here in Columbia, South Carolina, at the University of South Carolina. So thank you so much, and we will talk, I think.
Cheers, guys. Thank you so much for having me, and have a great rest of your night.